Friday, April 26th, 2024. Costa Rica, the Surquí Tunnel area along Route 32. The search operation is underway in brutal weather conditions. A heavy downpour is eroding the slopes, cutting visibility to nearly nothing. Rescue teams, law enforcement, and volunteers scour terrain, known for its unforgiving geography. Thick jungle giving way to steep drop-offs. Drones are launched to survey the hard-to-reach areas from above, while canine units comb the ground. After several hours, the dogs pick up a scent. At the same time, drone operators spot an unusual object hidden in dense vegetation, roughly a mile from the tunnel entrance. A specialized team begins the descent into the ravine. Through the wet grass and tangled underbrush, responders find the body of a woman. A 7-day search for 33-year-old Kimberly Araya Granados ends here. Now the forensic team begins the work of determining how she came to be at the bottom of this gorge. To understand where the investigation started, we need to rewind time 7 days from the tunnel discovery. Morning of April 19th. A man walks into the judicial police station. This is Dave, Kimberly's husband. He's there to file an official report about his wife's disappearance. The officers on duty, seasoned from seeing relatives of missing persons in shock, hysteria, or complete disorientation, immediately notice something off. This visitor is unnervingly composed. No quiver in his voice, no frantic movements, no pleading for help. Dave speaks in a measured way, forming his sentences clearly, almost as if he's there to file an insurance claim, not report that his wife is missing. In the detective's office, the husband lays out his version of events. According to him, Kimberly did not return home the night before after her shift. Dave says he waited for her all night, called her, but her phone went unanswered. He underscores his role as a caring parent, now left alone with 3 children and forced to handle logistics while his wife disappears somewhere. He frames his words not as a victim of circumstance, but as a partner to the investigation, ready to offer what he calls useful leads. It's in this office that Dave begins his play, handing detectives 2 ready-made theories that shift suspicion away from the home. First, he points to a rideshare service. The husband says Kimberly frequently used an app like Uber and strongly suggests they check the driver who gave her the last ride. He emphasizes passenger vulnerability and the potential for a troubling past in rideshare drivers. This theory sounds plausible and testable, so investigators make it a priority. Without missing a beat, Dave adds a second variable into the mix, a certain co-worker of Kimberly's. In his statements, he mentions a man from her workplace with whom she might have had a conflict, or, conversely, too close an association. Dave never directly accuses, he's just sharing observations, subtly shifting focus onto his wife's professional circle. He paints a complicated picture in which Kimberly could have fallen victim to a traffic incident or trouble stemming from workplace tensions. Detectives log every word. The statement is signed. Dave leaves the station, having just handed police a carefully crafted set of false leads. At the time, officers had no reason to doubt his story. They saw a calm man, seemingly cooperative. No one at the station knew yet that this search for Kimberly, initiated by her husband, was actually a calculated move to buy time and steer resources toward ride-share drivers and co-workers, while the real evidence was somewhere else entirely. To separate fact from fiction, we need to reconstruct the timeline of Kimberly's last full day in detail. Thursday, April 18th. The last day Kimberly Araya Granados was seen alive outside her home. She spends the morning and afternoon at her job in the El Coyol Free Trade Zone. Her phone's location data and co-worker statements confirm she remained in the office until the end of her shift. After work, according to her schedule, Kimberly heads to a planned one-on-one meeting with her direct supervisor. That conversation lasts a while, after which she briefly speaks with another co-worker. Witnesses say she acted completely normal. There were no signs of distress, no visible tension or conflict in her behavior. That evening, Kimberly starts her trip home. At exactly 9 p.m., she books a ride through the Uber app. The digital trail is preserved on the company's servers. The ride data shows her route wasn't direct. She had to use 2 separate drivers. The first driver dropped her at an intermediate stop, where she transferred to a second vehicle. Both drivers were later interviewed by investigators and confirmed she traveled alone and exited at the requested address. The pivotal moment, the one that shatters the husband's original version, comes at 10:17 p.m. A surveillance camera mounted on a neighbor's house across the street captures a vehicle pulling up. In the headlights, it's clear. The car stops at the gate of the home shared by Kimberly and Dave. The passenger door opens. Kimberly steps out. The footage is in high resolution, clear enough to confirm her identity beyond any doubt. She's wearing the same clothes she had on when she left for work that morning. She looks composed, carries her bag in hand. Kimberly walks to the front door, takes out her keys, and unlocks it herself. No one greets her, but no one forces her inside either. At 10:18 p.m., the door closes behind her. The Uber drives off. That timestamp, 10:17 p.m., would become the turning point of the entire investigation. It directly contradicted the statement Dave gave to police the next morning. His claim that Kimberly never came home from work and that he waited for her all night falls apart in the face of hard evidence. Kimberly didn't vanish during her ride, didn't go missing en route, and wasn't harmed in a public space. She made it home safely, walked through her front door, and locked it behind her, entering what should have been the safest place in the world, her own house. To understand the significance of what happened next, we need to compare the footage with Dave's official statement. In the initial report filed on April 19th, Dave gave a detailed account of his actions the night Kimberly disappeared. According to his written testimony, he stayed at home waiting for her return. He claimed he only started getting worried close to midnight. The report includes a precise time. Dave stated that he got into his car and went out to search for Kimberly at exactly 11:40 p.m. This built the image of a patient husband who held on to hope for hours before taking action. But the neighbor's surveillance camera was still recording, and just 30 minutes after Kimberly entered the house, it captured a completely different story. At 10:47 p.m., exactly 30 minutes after Kimberly walked through the door, the garage gate begins to open. A silver sedan pulls out. Dave is behind the wheel. The car doesn't idle or wait. It immediately accelerates and drives off. The gap between Dave's reported departure at 11:40 p.m. and the actual footage showing him leaving at 10:47 p.m. is 53 minutes. That's not a memory lapse. It's not a minor mistake. Dave had told investigators he was still at home during that time, trying to reach his wife by phone. But video evidence shows he was already gone. That single fact reclassifies the entire case. Investigators now have a narrow, crucial time window. Between the moment Kimberly stepped inside, 10:17 p.m., and the moment Dave's car left the garage, 10:47 p.m., only 30 minutes had passed. Everything that happened to Kimberly occurred within that short window. The story of a husband who waited until midnight to act collapses. Dave didn't go looking for her. He knew she was home. And he left the house shortly after she arrived. Now, detectives needed to find out exactly where Dave went that night, if the purpose of his late drive wasn't to look for his wife. When Dave pulled out of the driveway at 10:47 p.m., he didn't head downtown to search the streets. Traffic camera data allowed authorities to track his route with precision. The vehicle headed out of the city toward a toll expressway that winds through a mountainous, sparsely populated area. At exactly midnight, a key piece of evidence was recorded. The vehicle approaches a toll plaza. Bright overhead lighting and high-resolution cameras give investigators a clear, unobstructed view inside the cabin. Dave is clearly visible behind the wheel. He's alone in the driver's seat. The front passenger seat is empty. But it's the back seat that immediately draws the attention of analysts. The camera captures a large object inside the vehicle. Lying across the back seat is a bulky shape, completely covered with a white cloth or sheet. The outline has no sharp angles and spans nearly the full width of the seat. Video forensic specialists examine the footage frame by frame. Based on the size and contours beneath the fabric, the object is consistent with the dimensions of a human body. The car passes through the toll booth and disappears into the darkness of the highway, heading toward an area known for dense tropical vegetation and steep ravines. About an hour and a half later, cameras at the same toll plaza record the vehicle again. Dave drives through the gate once more, this time heading back toward home. The image quality allows investigators to inspect the interior again. The contrast between the two recordings is undeniable. The back seat is now empty. These two moments, the outbound drive with a concealed load and the return trip with nothing inside, become visual proof of the disposal of a body. The time Dave was gone and the geographic link to Route 32 sharply narrow the search area. More importantly, they confirm what investigators had begun to suspect. The search for a missing wife was staged. That night, Dave wasn't looking for Kimberly. He was hiding her. While law enforcement combed the terrain and volunteers posted flyers, the investigation shifted into the digital realm. Specialists seized electronic devices and requested cloud-based data. An analysis of Dave's online activity on the morning of April 20th, the day after he filed the missing person report, revealed his true priorities. While the official narrative suggested a husband hoping to find his wife alive, his browser history told a very different story. At 9:30 a.m., instead of searching for hospital numbers or rescue services, Dave typed a specific query into the search bar. How long does a body decompose in a tropical climate? At that moment, to the rest of the city, Kimberly was still considered simply missing. Dave wasn't looking for ways to find a person. He was researching how biological traces disappear. That single action shifted him from the role of a concerned spouse to that of a suspect attempting to cover up a crime. To understand the source of this cold detachment, detectives returned to the phone records from the night of the crime. One short message immediately stood out. According to the phone records, at 10:42 p.m., a text message was sent from Kimberly's phone to Dave. It read, "Don't lock the door." This was the very message Dave had shown to police early on as proof that his wife was running late and had asked him to leave the door unlocked. But investigators already had the footage from the neighbor's security camera. That video clearly showed Kimberly entering the home at 10:17 p.m. By the time that message was sent, she had already been inside the house for 25 minutes. A person standing in her own living room or bedroom wouldn't logically be texting a request to leave a door open she had already walked through. Experts matched up the timelines. The 10:42 text wasn't sent by Kimberly. It was typed and sent by Dave himself, using her phone, after she was no longer a threat. It was a calculated move to create what investigators later called a digital ghost, a piece of manufactured evidence to suggest Kimberly was still outside and alive nearly an hour later. But just like the highway cameras, technology turned against the person trying to use it to create an alibi. To understand the why behind all of this, detectives had to zoom out from that 1 week in April and take a deeper look into the family's past. A story that began all the way back in 2010. Financial records and tax returns told a clear story about the household dynamic. For over a decade, Kimberly had been the family's sole financial provider. She paid the mortgage, utility bills, groceries, and covered all expenses tied to raising their sons and daughters. She worked overtime shifts at the free trade zone, keeping the household stable. Meanwhile, Dave held no official employment. According to the documents, he contributed nothing to the family's income, identifying as a stay-at-home partner. But testimony from Kimberly's relatives painted a different picture of who held the power. During police interviews, Kimberly's mother described a pattern of total control imposed by Dave. According to her, Dave systematically isolated Kimberly from the outside world. He micromanaged her schedule, checked her phone calls, and blocked her from seeing family. For years, Kimberly's loved ones watched her grow more distant, but any attempts to intervene were shut down. Dave kept the house sealed tight against outside influence. The crisis began just weeks before Kimberly disappeared. She had announced her decision to file for divorce. That single move threatened to unravel everything. Under the terms of their prenup and local property laws, divorce didn't just mean the end of a relationship. It spelled financial ruin for Dave. He would lose access to Kimberly's income, the right to live in the home she paid for, and any control over their sons and daughters. Witnesses confirmed, talks of separation escalated quickly into threats. Dave told Kimberly he wouldn't let her leave, and that she'd never take the kids. Investigators didn't interpret this as jealousy or heartbreak. They saw it as the calculated reaction of someone who realized his lifeline was being cut off. Within that framework, the crime becomes something else entirely, a way to preserve what he believed were his assets. No wife means no divorce. And with Kimberly gone, the house, the finances, and custody would all default to the surviving spouse. Let's return to the timeline of April 19th. After leaving the police station, Dave took a series of steps that, at the time, didn't raise any red flags, but would later become crucial in revealing the full scope of the crime. He returned home, gathered the belongings of his 3 sons and daughters, and quickly dropped them off at his sister's house. On the surface, it seemed like a reasonable move, a father shielding his family from the emotional toll of a missing person investigation. The kids remained in their aunt's care. But when investigators compared this move to vehicle records, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. The car seen on highway cameras that night, the one carrying a covered object in the back seat, wasn't registered to either Dave or Kimberly. The vehicle was owned by Dave's sister. She had loaned it to him just one day before April 18th. That means she had provided him with a clean vehicle, one not tied directly to the victim's home. And the fact that this car was parked in the couple's garage the night of the incident strongly suggested premeditation. What started as suspicion that this was no spur-of-the-moment act soon turned into near certainty once investigators recovered deleted messages from an old archive. Among them was one that Dave had sent to a close friend several months before the incident. In it, he laid out a disturbing hypothetical. If she ever tries to leave, I'll take her out. And my sister will take the kids. That message read like a written confession. And the scenario he described, it played out with chilling accuracy. Kimberly was eliminated at the exact moment she attempted to leave. Her body was transported in his sister's vehicle, and just as promised in the message, the kids ended up in her care. Legally and logistically, Dave's plan worked. Now, prosecutors had to prove that his sister wasn't just a bystander, but an active participant. On April 25th, 6 days after the missing person report was filed, Dave's legal status changed. Police secured a warrant and entered the house that had previously been off limits. It was no longer being treated as the residence of a worried spouse, but as a possible crime scene. Forensic investigators began with a visual sweep. The home was spotless. No overturned furniture, no broken items, no signs of a struggle. Floors had been scrubbed, surfaces gleamed. To probe deeper, specialists deployed luminol, a chemical that detects traces of blood even long after it's been wiped away. They turned off the lights and moved methodically through the living room, the bedroom, the hallway. Nothing. No blue glow. No indication of blood anywhere. But for investigators, this sterility was its own kind of evidence. The total lack of biological material ruled out causes involving sharp or ballistic weapons. That left one leading theory: mechanical asphyxiation. The crime had likely been committed quietly, without outward signs of aggression, most likely by strangulation. That would explain the absence of blood and why no one in the neighborhood reported hearing screams. While one team worked inside, forensic techs turned their attention to the sisters' car, parked in the garage. Their target? The vehicle's onboard computer and navigation module. Unlike a suspect, those systems can't be intimidated or coached into lying. GPS tracker data was extracted and mapped out against the terrain. The digital trip log from the night of April 19th didn't just show a route along Highway 32, it recorded an exact set of coordinates where the vehicle came to a stop. The car had pulled over about 9 miles outside the city, near the edge of Braulio Carrillo National Park. Logs revealed that the vehicle remained on the shoulder for exactly 4 minutes. Not enough time for a break or car trouble, but just enough time to remove something from the back seat and push it down a steep slope. The coordinates from that stop were immediately sent to the search teams. They now had more than just a general location. They had a specific grid to search. We return now to the place where this story began, the Circuit Tunnel on April 26th. But this time, we see the scene not as outside observers, but through the lens of what the investigation has uncovered. The GPS coordinates led rescue crews to a specific drop-off point. Visual scans from drones confirmed the presence of a foreign object hidden in dense jungle below, but reaching it on foot was impossible. The operation shifted into the category of high-risk vertical rescue. Red Cross responders and firefighters set up rope and harness systems along the edge of Highway 32. To descend safely to the ravine floor, they had to rappel down the cliffside. It took hours. The slope was made of slick clay, tangled tree roots, and loose stone. At the bottom, caught against the base of a tree, was a bundle. This was the same object captured on surveillance, on the back seat of Dave's sister's car. The body was wrapped in a bedsheet and tightly bound, which helped preserve biological evidence despite the tropical conditions and heavy rainfall. Hauling it back up took time. Once the stretcher was placed on the asphalt, forensic techs performed an initial exam. The condition of the remains aligned with the timeline of disappearance: 8 days in humid forest conditions. Despite signs of decomposition, investigators were able to confirm the identity based on physical characteristics and the clothes Kimberly was last seen wearing in the video from April 18th. The very moment Kimberly's body was loaded into the coroner's van, across town, the final stage of the police operation was already underway. The arrest warrant for Dave had been signed. Authorities didn't wait on the full autopsy results. The evidence was already overwhelming: false testimony, surveillance footage, the GPS data, and now the recovered body. Dave was at his sister's home, where he had taken the kids. The arrest was uneventful. He didn't resist or attempt to flee. Officers placed him in handcuffs and escorted him out of the house. At that moment, the missing person case officially ended, and a full-blown criminal investigation began. Now that law enforcement had every piece of the puzzle, from surveillance footage to autopsy findings, they could reconstruct the events of April 18th with documentary precision. 10:17 p.m. Kimberly steps out of a rideshare. A neighbor's security cam shows her unlocking the door with her own keys and walking inside. The door shuts behind her. That was the last moment Kimberly had control over her own fate. Inside, Dave was waiting. Given the complete lack of struggle or signs of damage in the sterile living room, investigators concluded the assault was sudden. Swift. Kimberly likely didn't even get the chance to set her bag down. Death occurred sometime between 10:20 and 10:40 p.m. The cause was mechanical asphyxiation. This crime was committed in total silence, without the use of any weapon, which explains the absence of blood, even under luminol testing. At 10:42 p.m., the next phase began. Cold and calculated. Kimberly's body was still inside the home, but Dave picked up her phone. Instead of calling emergency services, he typed a message. "Don't lock the door." He sent it to his own number. With this single act, the perpetrator created a fake digital trail, one meant to make it seem like Kimberly was still alive and outside somewhere. The next 5 minutes were spent staging the scene. Dave used a bed sheet and ropes to wrap the body into a compact shape, the same one we later see on highway surveillance footage. Because the garage was connected to the house by an interior door, he never had to step outside. He moved the remains directly into his sister's car, parked inside. At 10:47 p.m., the garage door opens. The gray sedan pulls onto the street. 30 minutes had passed since Kimberly walked through the front door. In that half hour, Dave had ended a life, faked a message, and loaded the body. The route took him through town, out toward Highway 32. At exactly midnight, toll booth cameras captured Dave at the wheel, with a bundled object in the back seat. 14 kilometers later, in a desolate section of a national park, the car pulls over. The GPS tracker records a stop lasting 4 minutes, just enough time to remove the bundle and push it down a steep slope. At 1:30 a.m., Dave returned to an empty house. The back seat was clean. He went to bed, only to wake a few hours later and step into his new role, the concerned father, ready to report a missing wife to the police. The autopsy performed by the medical examiner officially confirmed the investigators' theory. Kimberly died from mechanical asphyxiation. There were no stab wounds, no signs of gunshot trauma. The pathologist's findings perfectly aligned with the crime scene, sterile, silent, and without external force. Faced with an overwhelming mountain of evidence, from toll camera footage to GPS data and message logs, Dave's legal team pivoted. Realizing there was no way to challenge the technical proof in court, the defense entered plea negotiations. Dave agreed to plead guilty in exchange for the prosecution dropping its pursuit of the maximum sentence. This legal strategy met fierce resistance from Kimberly's family. Her parents and brother went public with their demands for a full trial, arguing that the cold-blooded planning and heartless deception Dave displayed during the search effort warranted the harshest sentence allowed by law. But the most bitter irony of this case wasn't found in prison time. It was in what happened to the children. The final piece of Dave's plan, the one laid out months earlier in a deleted message to a friend, was quietly carried out by default. By the time he was arrested and Kimberly was gone, the minors were already staying at their aunt's. Dave's sister, the same person whose car had been used to move the body. Following protocol, Child Services left the kids with the closest blood relatives, the ones who had been housing them in the days after the crime. Kimberly's family launched a prolonged legal battle, trying to challenge the decision and pointing to the sisters' indirect involvement in evidence concealment. But by the end of the investigation, the kids still remained in the care of the perpetrator's family. Dave is now cut off from society, but his choices continue to shape the lives of those left behind. The investigation is closed. The criminal has been identified. But justice, in the most human sense, has not been restored. Kimberly, who for years supported her family and fought to reclaim her freedom, paid for that attempt with her life. And her sons and daughters remain trapped in the world their father built.